I wish I could tell you that if you look at my board involvement, it was done with a very keen, forward-looking, proactive lens, but it was not. And so I'll talk about the first board role. A friend of mine that I had worked with was on a board of the McMichael Canadian Art Collection. It's a gallery focused on Group of Seven art, just north of Toronto in Kleinburg. And he said, would you like to come and join the board? I said, wow, that's really interesting. Haven't done it before. That sounds cool. So, in 2008, I joined that board. I joined that board and spent a couple of years learning how a board works, what the dynamics are, what kind of things they focus on, and really getting myself a little bit more knowledgeable. And then in 2010, I got a call from the ministry, the government of Ontario. So this organization is an agency of the government of Ontario under Ministry of Culture, Tourism, and Sport. And they said, we just want to let you know that we're no longer going to renew the chair's position going forward, even though she's been there for the last 8 years. And we've talked to all the board members that are remaining, and they've decided that you should be chair. And I said, I don't know anything about that. What does that mean? And they said, well, you'll figure it out. And I said, no. And so then they phoned me back and said, well, we've gone again, and they really think you should be chair. And so I reluctantly accepted that role, not knowing very much about what a chair is, having 2 years of governance under my belt, on the condition that they would allow me to have greater input on who I could bring on the board, which had been a real problem for that organization. So I walked into a role where I became chair. A lot of the board members weren't renewed. We had the potential to have 23 board members. We were down to, I think, 9 board members because they had all not been renewed, including the chair whose term had not been renewed. And so I sort of said, okay, so what does this chair role look like? What am I supposed to do? And I was told there are really 3 things that a chair needs to focus and a board needs to focus on. One is really stewardship of the asset. The second is effective performance. And the third is just from a risk and compliance standpoint. And the last sort of related to all those is effective performance of the CEO. And so I said, okay, well, let me figure that out. Start with the last one. So said, okay, let me talk about the performance of the CEO. When's the last time we did a performance appraisal to get a sense of how the CEO is doing? And the answer was, I think the last time was 14 years ago. And so maybe we should do one. That would be a good idea, I think. So we did a 360-degree where we interviewed the people that the board he reports to, his peers and his subordinates. And we got to 360, and there was a resounding agreement amongst the board that the CEO was not doing an effective job. So I was appointed in April. By June 10th, we're having a meeting, and the meeting involves, should we terminate the CEO? And for those of you who have board experience, the biggest decision you'll probably ever make is, should you hire or should you fire the CEO? And so we decided to part ways with the CEO, and we had to convince the ministry that this was the right thing to do. So that was getting thrown into the fire in a very, very significant way very early on. And what I came to realize is that what we had thought was good governance under the previous chair was anything but good governance. It was really where the separation between a chair and the CEO was non-existent. The chair acted like the CEO, did not really advise the board of issues, risks, challenges, performance, and so forth. And so the board had gone along just, basically nodding their head, saying, yes, things were fine when things really were not fine. And so as I sort of got into that, I had to become really, really knowledgeable pretty quick, because now we needed to terminate the CEO, negotiate that, hire a new CEO. And over the course of that role, which ended up being about 8 years in total, 6 years as chair, I realized that there was so much more to how boards were working to improve the effectiveness of boards in a meaningful way. Some of the things we implemented at that board, of a budget of $7 million and a small organization of 50 people, are actually better than what I've seen in many of the boards that are 10, 20, 100 times our size. And I'm just going to give you a funny example of that. 6 years, about 5 years after becoming chair, doing a lot of work in stabilizing the organization, hiring a new CEO, getting a lot more funding, revamping the board, increasing the engagement effectiveness. I went to the ministry and said, I just want to let you know that I'm going to step down next year. And they looked at me in this blank look and they said, why? They said, the only time someone steps down is 2 reasons. One is if they've done something wrong, they need to be kicked out, or if they die. And I don't think, I said, well, I'm not dying, and I don't think I've done anything wrong, but this is good governance to have succession planning on a board. So we went through that process, and I said, well, give me some ideas as to how bigger organizations have done that. And the bigger organizations in our world were the Art Gallery of Ontario, Royal Ontario Museum, Ontario Science Centre. they're all going through leadership transitions at the board level. And they said, don't know, they don't have a plan. I said, but that can't be right. They're much bigger. They said, no. Then they said, can you go in and talk to them about that? Because you would be really effective in giving them a proper plan that I had tabled for the cycle. So again, it was really a case of learning trial by fire, trying to read as much as I could, learn from peers, talk to other chairs. And then what I decided to do was go back and get an education in proper governance by getting my ICD designation, which stands for Independent Corporate Director, to really bolster my experiential knowledge with real practical, theoretical, best practices in the area to bolster our performance at the board level. So that was my introduction to the McMichael. After that experience, I realized that I actually really enjoyed being at a strategic level, understanding the role of a board was not to do, but to advise, creating this separation between the chair of the board and the actual leadership team. And our role was really to support the leadership team achieve the strategic goals of an organization in the ways that I've described.